the president continues to abuse the government and the powers of arrest, of detention, indictment, prosecution, jailing even, to go after critics. This is a diverse list of targets. And while some people are busy and have looked away, and there were Republicans who initially said, well, what's one or two cases? We're going to show you tonight we're way past that, with new developments in the key case of something that many people thought wouldn't happen in America, journalists rounded up and indicted for their coverage. What all the people targeted have in common is that they have criticized Trump, even if they once were Trump officials or Republicans. Today, Don Lemon, a veteran CNN anchor known to so many, who also is an independent journalist, was back appearing in court because the administration continues to push what are widely derided legally as flimsy charges, probably unconstitutional, but this case is real. This is not going away. Now, he was covering a protest at a Minneapolis church where other individuals may have violated the law, including storming a church, but Lemon was covering it. This is a huge deal. He pled not guilty.
This isn't just about me. This is about all journalists, especially here in the United States. For more than 30 years, I've been a journalist, and the power and protection of the First Amendment has been the underpinning of my work. The First Amendment, the freedom of the press, the bedrock of our democracy.
But at what point, in your view, constitutionally, Mr. Cobb, how many such cases targeting critics become a high crime, become impeachable? One or two, maybe people of good faith debate. 5 or 6 is more than we've had in decades. We'll put the chart back up to remind people as we end the week, because it's grown a lot this week with Mr. Lemon as well in court. At what number does it become a potentially impeachable offense?
Well, it should only be one. If there's one fraudulent, unsupported indictment that's brought for personal reasons, political reasons, in which the facts are distorted and the law is abused, that alone should be impeachable. You know, the multitude of cases that we've had now certainly provides a wealth of evidence that could be used to impeach Pam Bondi. I think, you know, it's probably difficult to extend you know, her performance and the illegal and unconstitutional, unethical way that she's managed the Justice Department all the way to the president. But the president, you know, on impeachment alone, you know, that issue, there's so many things in the column that deserve impeachment. You know, taking a $500 million bribe from the
slow you down, because you're
sure
you're very knowledgeable about these things, and so you're referring to, of course, the impeachment clause is a congressional power under the Constitution for both the president. That's what we hear about it the most. But you're reminding people it exists for other officers. Are you suggesting that if the Democrats were to win the House, because we can see how this has not gotten oversight from most Republicans, a few criticize it, but very few, you're suggesting that they could also try to impeach, say, Bondi, Blanche, those responsible for this miscarriage of politicized justice?
So, I'm not so sure about Blanche, whether, the confession that he extorted out of Ghislaine Maxwell in exchange for favorable treatment, whether that rises to an impeachable offense. Perhaps it does. But certainly with regard to Bondi, she obviously unfit for office based on her performance yesterday. Kristi Noem, who's supervising the execution of American citizens and lying about them as being alleged terrorists. Hegseth and the multitude of classified violations that he has, and as well as the war crimes being committed at his behest. All of those people should be impeached for sure, and I expect that we'll see articles introduced if the Democrats are lucky enough to take over the House. But I think with the president, you've got really extraordinary information out there. The $500 million bribe from the UAE in exchange for our AI chips, the $480 million plane from Qatar in exchange for a Air Force base, and him parking his Venezuela oil revenue account in Qatar. The facts here are just extraordinary and unprecedented. This is not a matter of degree. This is a ripple in the force, and impeachment, however, is a weak tool in the hands of a Congress where you have people like Mike Johnson and others, willing to do whatever the president desires, and certainly not willing to honor their oaths of office to work for the American people as opposed to Donald Trump.
Do you view the history here, as well as Mr. Lutnick lying about this while he was in office, while he was Commerce Secretary in the last year, as something that should merit his dismissal? And what do you think, given you have a lot of experience, about this sort of contrast that, maybe it's for public pressure reasons, what they might call the, quote, optics, but the banks and some of the big institutions seem to be making more changes in response to what's come out than the White House itself?
Yes, Lutnick in any other administration would have been gone long ago. But certainly this type of conduct would never have been tolerated by any other president without requesting his resignation. And frankly, the president shouldn't have to request the resignation of anybody with integrity in those positions when confronted with, misconduct of this type. In history, even Nixon resigned when humiliated. Lutnick's testimony, interesting because he tries to minimize the incident on the island where he took his wife and children. And this is, keep in mind, this is 7 years after he said he had no further contact with Epstein. He said that it all ended in 2005 when he and his wife walked out of his house, disturbed about their neighbor, their next door neighbor, who remained their next door neighbor. And also, it's not only did he lie about the island visit and that conduct, but within another year or two after the island visit, he and Epstein both invested multi-million dollars in the same joint venture. So these are deep ties. I mean, in Europe, people who are just mentioned in the files are resigning. Lutnick, having lied about his participation, should be long gone.
Yeah. On the investigative side, I'll put up what we now learn from the DOJ. I thought this was one of the most striking documents. You don't usually see them in public, which is the inner circle and who they were tracing. Obviously, everyone has a right to a lawyer, but they don't have a right to lawyers who commit crimes. You can use an accountant, but they were clearly subpoenaing and looking at some of these individuals. One of them, Brunel, indicted and then died abroad. How do you interpret this, given your background? Obviously, it's possible that good faith, honest prosecutors did run down these leads. It just didn't find enough to prosecute inside the U.S. It's also possible that there's more to the story, given everything we've learned. How do you view it based on what we know at this time?
So I think there is a distinction between unethical, disgusting, inappropriate conduct and criminal activity. It's not always clear what that is. But keep in mind, there were very competent prosecutors involved in the Epstein cases. Maureen Comey, in the Southern District, was among the serious people that were trying to bring people to justice there, appropriately so. She prosecuted Maxwell, and I think the reality is there may not have been a lot of criminal cases, but there are a lot of people as to whom there was evidence, contrary to what Bondi said, contrary to what Blanche said, contrary to what Patel said. And they pretended to have reviewed every document according to them, which we now know would have been impossible given the 3 million documents that they miraculously found and dumped last week. So this is really a scandal. It's a scandal that has multiple victims. We saw many of them in the well of the Congress the other day when Bondi was testifying and refusing to acknowledge their existence or apologize to him, and that's tragic. And they deserve justice to the extent justice can be available, but it's not going to be available unless there's some transparency. And so far, what we have is a Justice Department eager to protect Trump and his donors and those who work for him, but not at all eager to protect the victims. And that is sad. It's a shocking. It reflects the shocking decay of our government under Trump and Bondi.